Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to HMP TV's Solution Room, where today we're interviewing Esther Xosei, who's back with us again, to give us a clarity about how the community can get involved with the reparations movement, which isn't, to most of our understanding, a one-day march, but an ongoing process that needs to be informed by the greatest and brightest minds of our community in their professional capacity. So, welcome, Esther, back to the Solution Room.
Thank you.
What I'd like to speak about, as somebody from outside the movement who actually attended the march last year and did experience some frustrations, because I do see that people are very protective of what they have, and that there are many diverse energies that need to come into the movement to make it as functional as it needs to be to put Britain in a position to capitulate. Now, I've known Brother Kwaku for some time. I know many of the brothers from the Nation of Islam for quite a while as well. And at the same time, felt like an outsider as we got to the Parliament Square.
Okay.
And I realised that there are a lot of professionals from our community that we do need to set up infrastructures. People who are in banking, education, civil engineering, and all of these things that create the repair, who may feel in the same position, who may not even have turned up at the march. So if you could just tell us a little bit about how people can get involved, because I always say get in where you fit in, but if you don't realise where you fit in, there's no engagement whatsoever.
Okay, so first of all, let me just say, the Reparations March, which takes place on the 1st of August, Messiah, as we rename it, is not the whole reparations movement. It's not the whole ISMA. I mentioned that term. It means International Social Movement for African Reparations. That's a key point to make. So when you're saying where do people get involved, how people get involved in the movement, the march is not the whole movement. It's only an aspect of it. And for those of us like myself and others who are interested in the science of movement building, who study our movements in the past and in the present and other movements with a view to, how do we succeed? What do other groups do? What have they done? And not enough of us are looking at the reparations as a movement and applying the science and methodology of movement building to even how we analyse, how we discourse around what that movement is. But people, basically, you get involved at your level.
Yes.
Okay? At your level. Now, I think many people misunderstand that the day, really, the march now, the physical march that happens, is a community outdooring. It's a showcasing of the diversity of people who can lay claim to the movement. Yeah? So all the people you've mentioned, I mean, you use this term professionals, and I understand why you're using it, and I know you're speaking to the skill, the competency, the knowledge foundation. Because yes, we're not going to succeed in our emancipation by being unlearned.
Absolutely.
And this is the thing, we have a reparations movement that is being spearheaded. Not that we're the only movement, but I'm talking about the movement being spearheaded from the UK. We have instilled within it certain key foundational values. One being, for instance, the motto for the African Emancipation Day Reparations March Committee is education is preparation for reparations.
Absolutely.
And we're not just talking now about sending people to school and college and university. It is about the true process of education, drawing out from within, the best from within, so that we can actually reach and maximise our human potential. Many of us know what our destinies are. We're working towards that. Others are still finding it. But everyone has a place. So there is a place in the line of this march for everyone. And the victory that we're seeking, there's also a place for everyone there too. But people have to find their place. They have to make it. It's not like you're going into a nightclub and somebody can refuse you entry at the door. It's not like that. Movements don't operate like that. you find your own connection. So if you are into banking, you've mentioned bankers, for instance, who, I don't know if there's been any bankers, but I know there are people who are very much into cooperative economics, who are into cooperatives, who are economists who have been on the march and come every year. So I think that people need to know that many people come on the march, and unless you speak to them, you don't know who that person is. You don't know what their background is. And I think it's a mistake to think that many who might see themselves as part of the intelligentsia or the professional class in many different professions don't feel welcome or are not involved. People are involved in initiatives at their level.
Absolutely.
So you, for instance, when I mentioned the economist that comes every year, his particular field is around developing a cooperative bank that we can utilise. And he's very interested in how that can be of service to our movement for reparations. And then resourcing social enterprise and community development projects and initiatives that are reparatory, that our people are engaged in, whether it's in formal education, curriculum development, whether it's about developing services that we need, whether it's about trade or whatever it may be. How do we have a supply line where we can be actually resourcing goods from our countries in Africa and the Caribbean, how they can be shipped around the world and traded, and we can develop a political economy for our movement.
Yes.
So we do have people like that who come on the march. But one of the things about the march is that there's a particular perception around who the marchers are, and especially if somebody who doesn't necessarily turn up, say, in African attire, for instance, like some of us might be, and might get typecast as, oh, those are the Pan-Africanists, oh, those are the Afrocentrics, oh, those are the Nation of Islam or the Muslims, and that's what we do. We judge people by appearance.
Absolutely.
As opposed to necessarily the content of who they are and what they're about. So what I would say is that everyone is welcome there, but remember, the march is only one day.
Yes.
So in terms of people's involvement in the broader movement, that will be in a variety of ways. Now, the thing about last year and this year in particular is that we are the people who facilitate the march, but it's a people's march. But remember, some of us are spending a lot more time really studying and analysing what are we doing. How can we move the people from where they're at to where we need to go? And how do you move masses of people who don't necessarily even have a working relationship with each other, don't have a personal connection with each other? How do you try and hold this group of different people with different interests, different agendas, sometimes competing? How do you get them to stay focused and stay on this and collectively identifying? Now that is a process and it is a science that we are still trying to perfect.
Absolutely.
We're not there yet because our people are not fully on board yet. So how can it be perfect? You're not there. It won't be perfect until you get involved. So find the groups, find the organisations, find the personalities in our community that you can identify with, that you also know identify with this. Reparations, reparatory justice. That's what I would say people need to do. So there are teachers' organisations that are doing work at that level. There are doctors and healers and medical professionals who are operating at a certain level. So even some of the volunteering we get on the march, the fact that we have first aiders, a lot of our people who are working in the NHS, people who are nurses, and other medical professionals who are volunteering their time on the day. But you see them in a T-shirt, you don't know who they are. You just think it's someone who just did a little, St. John's ambulance, whatever, first, no disrespect to that. But we do have a lot of skilled people who are on the march. But they're seeing it, they're working. Right? On that day, they are serving our community. Because remember, this is not something where people are coming and getting paid, and it's not an event where we fly speakers in and they get an honorarium. People fund their participation in this march and in this process, including our delegations that come from overseas. And this year, we have, in particular, 3 main kind of international speakers that are coming. We have Kambanda Vey, who is from the Over Herero Genocide Foundation in Namibia, because it's important that we're touching base
at the same time
with African
as the
struggles.
Ashkenazi Jewish Holocaust took place.
Yes.
Only it touched a nation.
That's right.
And it touched that nation. It was quite extensive.
Yes.
The number of people.
That of Hereros and the Namas.
Yeah.
Now, many people don't know, and I didn't discover this until a couple of years ago, through this march, and people
Germany.
being not about the genocide, but about the fact that you have Over Herero people and Nama people living in the UK.
Yeah.
Okay? One of the other speakers we have is Stephen Golding, who represents the Jamaican National Commission on Reparations. So we're linking up with some of our brothers and sisters who have formalised reparations committees and other kind of structures and movements and groups in the Caribbean. And then we have Dr. Beryl Beekman, who represents, she's based in the Netherlands, a Surinamese sister, who is representing the Europe-wide NGO Consultative Council for African Reparations, NGOCA. Those are just some. There are many others, on the programme, but those are international people that we know are flying in specifically to kind of join forces with those that will be marching. Now, the theme for this year, building on last year's theme, is nothing about us without us. Nothing about you without you. That's really what it translates as. Actualising the reparatory justice change that we envisage. Now that is the key part, because to actualise the change is not saying, clearly there's no begging in that. That's not saying, you owe me, pay up or else. I mean, there are people that say that, and that is still a valid kind of statement, and for some of our people, but you have to organise to be able to make those demands on people. And the march is a way of organising and mobilising our forces. Not only our street forces, our foot soldiers, okay? The more raw end of our movement, but also the troops that we need that come from the professional classes that you've spoken about, who play a different role. And you're right, not everyone wants to physically come out on that day and march for various reasons. But it's a day when those of us that choose to, we're showing, it's a show of strength. And in fact, that march has 5 key aims, okay? And many people don't realise this. We're not marching because we think at the end of it, number 10 Downing Street or Theresa May is going to say, oh, how much money do you want? That is not why we're marching. We're using it as a mechanism, a tactic. It's not a strategy. It's a tactic. It's just one of a number of tactics that not only the organisers and facilitators and co-organisers, who are ultimately the people, are engaged in, but it's all the others that we haven't yet known or identified, that we don't know that they're doing things that are relevant to the repair in isolation. Good work, could be far-reaching, could have international dimensions, brilliant projects, programmes and initiatives that are about the repair, but we don't know, we haven't connected. And what this march does, it brings us all out into the open. And the theme has been chosen because it's then about pointing the fingers back at our people. What are you doing? We know the damage, we know the problems, but this is a solution, right? So what are the solutions? And what are the solutions that we can effect by ourselves, by our own individual, family, community, people's power? One of the key banners that we march with is a banner, the original Haitian flag, because that is a symbol of our historic reparations struggle that has contemporary consequences and impacts, and demands too. And it has on it reparations by our own people's power.
Self-determination.
Self-determination, liberty or death. And that is the original slogan from the original Haitian flag.
Which is why there was no losing.
Okay? So we are invoking an ancestral memory there, because remember, we're not just flesh and blood.
Good on.
You've spoken about the spirituality that often gets minimalized, but it's the essence. Because if you understand the Haitian Revolution, you have to know about the spiritual rituals that we did first. Okay? And that is key. And that has always been there in our struggle. And guess what? It's there in this movement too. But some of that work has to be hidden.
Absolutely.
For various reasons. We don't just come out a door and talk out everything. We're not foolish people. There are certain things that we don't talk about in public as much as we know we need to converse with our people and get out the right information and as much information as possible. Okay? So, actualizing the change that we envisage. What we're doing this year is we're inviting different members from our community who are going to be showcasing the self-repair and reparations, or external and internal repair programs and initiatives that they are working on across all fields of human endeavour, basically. So those who are doing innovative stuff, your own work, that is going to be showcased because people, I know lots of people know about it, but there's a lot more people that don't know. And there are many others who are doing brilliant work around, if you like, trying to stop this school to prison pipeline and many others. They're intervening in our schools. So we have representatives of groups. We have representatives of many of our schools, our Saturday schools in particular, who are trying to inculcate in our youth a grounding about who we are, our identity, our personality, our values, our cultures, our rites of passage, and how therefore they must carry themselves in the world and therefore shape curriculum and so forth so that we can live as full, whole human beings. They will be on the march. There will be people speaking about food sovereignty movement, people speaking about what we refer to as Maangamizi resistance. So all the manifestations of the Maangamizi, and I just want to show people this postcard because it's a visual, if you like, depiction of this is what the Stop the Maangamizi campaign talks about, and it has on it a list of 12 manifestations of genocide and ecocide: miseducation, extractive industries, austerity, land grabs, Afrophobia, unemployment and malemployment, forced sterilisation, police brutality, menticide, racist immigration policies, so Windrush, and all these deportations, denial of our national self-determination, denial of African Mother Earth rights, because there's also a big move by countries like Ecuador and Bolivia to have a charter, a United Nations charter, to recognise the rights of Mother Earth, one of which is Mother Earth has a right not to be despoiled, not to be raped, not to be extracted, everything out of. So when we're seeing climate change, and we're seeing all these extreme weather, some of which is produced by HARP projects and others. Definitely. But there are also other, we can't say natural causes because it's unnatural. And if you like, people are causing it. Man-made, so-called, is the cause of it. So we're speaking to all of those things. Debt bondage, bioweapons of mass destruction, HIV, AIDS, Ebola. These are bioweapons. Definitely. Okay, and they are recognised.
And they're economic bioweapons.
Economic bioweapons as well. So all the manifestations, nutricide it mentions, reproductive and sexual violence, dismemberment of our sovereign peoplehood. These are some of the manifestations of the genocide and the ecocide in particular. Now, when I spoke about Maangamizi resistance, now people who might be working on, say, deaths in custody, might not be linking up with people who are dealing with land grabs and extractive industries or nutricide and food sovereignty. They're working in silos, in isolation. But what the march is doing, it's bringing us together.
All together.
And what we do is we map out. We've tried to invite speakers on the programme who can speak to some of the diverse areas of not only the harm and the continuing harm, but the resistance to it, the solutions that we are effecting by our own people's power. Okay? So we still do talk about Maangamizi resistors. African Holocaust resistors.
Yeah.
Because there are people today, in some countries, they're literally being gunned down just because they want to live on land.
Absolutely.
They want to say to the multinational corporations, you cannot continue to take out our resources and pollute our environment. Look at the toxicity that's happened with oil, Shell in Nigeria, the Niger Delta.
Yeah.
They've said it will take over 30 years to clean up that. Now, what happens to those communities that live in that area that rely on the waterways for fishing, for trade? The waterways are being polluted. We're seeing now generations of deformities, okay? That as a result of the pollution and the ecocide that is having genocidal, in terms of human genocide, and we can go beyond genocide to omnicide, which is multiple genocides at the same time. That's where we're at. So when we're talking about the repair, we have to recognise that the repair has to be a total solution. We can't just think that we're going to repair ourselves in some little corner somewhere. Yeah? When we're living in a cesspit of harm and disrepair around us. So this is where now our power base and our people power base becomes key. Because some of us advocate a theory of change, which is a methodology of change. How are you going to get from here to there, the destination? Some of us believe, it's going to be professionals that are going to do it. I don't subscribe to that view exclusively. Because
it has to be holistic.
It has to be holistic. And whilst we do need the knowledge bases of our people, some people like to refer to themselves as professionals. It's not a term I use to describe myself, although many people might see me in that way. But what we know about our struggle is that sometimes the people who have more and the least, they're not the most suffering, they accommodate to a certain level.
Yes.
They assimilate to a certain level at their level of comfort. Which is why when you look at our people's revolutionary struggles, where you have had people that have come from elites, because we have them, elites in our communities, in our business, education, academic, economic elites and so forth, or just cultural, political elites, they have had to align themselves with the masses of the people in order for us to get the best out of them. Because if they just stuck to their group and their own, some people don't like to use the word class. Yeah. But if we talk about social division and differentiation, okay, we still have had those struggles amongst us. That's why in countries that are majority our people, you still have tension and conflict.
Absolutely.
Because guess what? You've got some that want to milk it for a small amount of people, and you've got the masses of the people that are saying, no, it's not happening. And we're gonna have warfare amongst us because you cannot be so greedy.
You see it in Brazil on a regular basis, where you see the kidnaps are actually to feed the community, and people wouldn't realise that. Yeah. Like when the team of Nike were kidnapped and they paid that ransom. Yeah. They don't realise how people are fed in the favelas. Right. But when you talk about a resistance now, Ya Santua would be a terrorist. Yeah. Ya Santua would be an insurgent, which is a misappropriation of the term, because insurgents come into a nation and counter-insurgents defend the nation. Yeah. So it's such a funny thing as we come to talk about this. I took my son and my nephew to see Star Wars before Christmas. No, sorry, it was after New Year. And the Empire is the aggressor, which is why I always say the Empire strikes black when we come. And it was the Republic who had been oppressed. Now, when the Empire is shooting off these escape pods at the end of the film, there is a general, and she uses one ship. She says, everybody go. And she sacrifices herself to blow up this Death Star. Okay. Now, the Republic was being invaded by the Empire, and she used this ship to blow up the Death Star, and she's the hero of the film. So she was a counter-insurgent. Being pursued by an aggressor. However, in the real world where we are, the propaganda plays out the polar extreme of that, in that the aggressor is the hero and the invaded is the terrorist on their own sovereign soil.
Right, right.
How does that work?
Exactly. And that's a brilliant example and one that I have to also reflect on because I haven't seen it, and I'm just thinking about it as you're talking to me. But the key thing I think is when we're talking about that resistance, as you said, people are out there. They might not necessarily be in England totally, but a lot of our people in the so-called Americas, or Abya-Yala, as the indigenous peoples of America call it, that's happening. In many African countries, that's happening. People are being executed, assassinated, because they're daring to stand up. They're daring to say, no, you can't come and build your mine here. Yeah, you can't come and dig up and displace thousands of our people. So when you see our people literally dying to cross the Sahara, to come into Europe, we have to question what are the push and pull factors, what's actually going on. And what we have is a homeland that is on fire. It's Absolutely. A burning house, okay? Now, it's a bit of a contradiction because on another level, you've got many of our people, more probably than ever before, who are able now to go and visit African countries or Caribbean countries. They're investing, they're developing business, enterprise, or what have you. But yet, the Ma'angamizi still continues. So we can have, even within the movement and within our societies, these parallel universes, where at the same time as we're trying to build the new world, you also have people trying to fight, not necessarily to preserve the old world, but they're having to fight just for their right to exist, so that they can even be there to build the new world.
But there's a problem when we come from the West. Because as a friend of mine says, there's no famine in paradise.
Exactly.
We don't, it's not that we don't see. We sometimes put on blinkers because it benefits us.
Absolutely.
What we've come to do, we don't want any relationship with this. Because why would I leave Blighty to suffer?
Exactly. And that's what a lot of people, they're working that out. Doesn't add up,
They are sufferers over here. But we've come for commercial gain, so that we can experience a lifestyle we're not capable of experiencing.
Exactly. And that's what many of our people are doing.
Absolutely.
Whereas previous generations, and this is why history is best qualified to reward our research, when we look at diaspora connections with Africa in the past, the best of it, I mean, we've always had these tendencies, okay? We're not a perfect people, okay? But when we look at the best of our traditions, what you saw is that many of us who went and were involved in the liberation struggle, to the degree it went to, in terms of formal direct rule, okay? We went and we worked in service of those movements. We grounded with the people. We didn't set up little expat communities where we're living, as you said, a lifestyle that we're not enjoying probably where we were born or wherever else we lived before. We're not doing that. And so this thing about whose idea, the slave's idea of freedom, we have to connect with our people because a big part of the repair is about reconnecting this dismembered family that has been taught and has actually carried on internal hatred. Oh, you sold us out.
Not knowing the history. So when you talk about a Yasantwa who fought where tens of thousands of soldiers were killed by the British. Then when somebody comes, there's an exchange where you're thinking about the balance of our people. And remember, the servitude that was in Africa when you would capture an enemy was completely different from the capitalist slave trade that took place that made us cattle.
Right, and in fact, Professor Karenga tells us that that's why we use the term Ma'angamizi, because he says we shouldn't use that term slave trade. And Chimwezu also says a similar thing, because it wasn't a trade for who?
No.
When we use the term trade, it minimises the genocide.
No trade.
And then all the deaths, all of that becomes collateral damage.
Absolutely.
Just an economic write-off. That people feel they can afford to take. We didn't benefit. Our nations didn't benefit. Our group, our people, our global nation did not benefit. Okay, so that's part of the repair: linguistic repairs, cognitive repairs,
Absolutely.
How we think, because how we think determines
as
how we
English
speak.
people, and we see each other through that lens.
Yes.
We see, our initial state is to see each other through European eyes.
Yeah.
Which is why we always get that thing of putting ourselves
Right.
on a pedestal
Right.
and looking down.
Right.
And you'll hear people refer to, well, black people, they. And I said, well, who is they?
Exactly, like as if we're not part of
Yeah.
it. But many people have actually disassociated themselves.
Absolutely. Psychologically.
So in terms of, being the change that we wish to see, nothing about us, without us, actualising the reparatory justice change we envisage, that fulfills aim 5 of the march, which is to showcase African people's grassroots initiatives for reparations. And aim 4, which is a key one, to demonstrate African people's strength, capacity and determination to speak to and challenge establishment power, read European power, white supremacy, with our growing grassroots power to effect and secure reparations on our own terms. So when we say grassroots, we're really talking about non-governmental, okay? Because many of us are not running governments, as it were, okay?
However, NGOs are very powerful.
Right. And we're not talking necessarily about the funded NGO sector. We're talking about our people that exist in the bit in between, And so it's about our capacity. When we stand up there boldly and we say these are the solutions that we have. Because if people think they're going to get a gyro in the post, or they're going, well, it's all done by bank transfer now, isn't it? Or somebody's just going to one day wake up and they're going to get some money. Even if we were in a position to compel our oppressors today to give up some compensation, okay, it's not going to happen in that way, right? So what would need to happen is looking at institution building, infrastructure development. Yes, our, if you like, African national institutions.
Absolutely.
Because when we look at other people's struggles, that is what they did. In the case of the Ashkenazi Jews, they had the Jewish Claims Conference, and it was powerful entities that came together within that group to say, this is what we're going to be, this is what our nature, even defining who's in the group and who's not,
and the
who can become a Jew and who isn't.
Which is 100 years old this year.
Right. So all of that. And this year is about finding out and inviting people who have got a piece of the solution, because no one of us, or any one of us, doesn't have all of it.
Absolutely.
Because we need others.
All of that.
And in order to complete this work and to be victorious, many more have to come forward, because they've got missing parts of the puzzle, even around the bits that are being done. So you originally were asking about how people get involved. Where, and you spoke about, where's my place in this movement? And I said that people need to find their place. With this movement, the ISMAR, International Social Movement for African Reparations, there are different pillars. The march is the street column.
Yes.
That is a street activity, and that's important because when we march through the streets, remember they're having to resource that in terms of staffing, the shutdown, in terms of business, traffic, everything. It's costing money, okay, to the establishment. Not only does it cost us to march, which people don't realise, but we have to pay money to actually march, a lot of money, by the time everything happens. So we are causing a disruption to the system, but at the same time, we are promoting our cause. Because when we're walking through the streets of London, we have many media representatives from different types of media, including European media, as I've said, but mainly our African media. And they are doing their own filming, people are taking pictures, they are actually recording, documenting this history as it is being written, yes? As we are walking it, as we are doing it. And we have to become our own media. So what we're doing when we have our placards, and we're doing our chanting, and the messages, we are telling all of those that we pass, this is our movement. These are this is what we want. Because they would have been hearing about reparations, but if you think about the average Caucasian that is struggling, they have insecurity about Brexit, they're concerned about the NHS, they're concerned about public sector jobs and so forth. So when they think about reparations, they think, well, hang on a minute, haven't you not had enough?
Absolutely.
You get And now you're all here and you're just killing each other and you still want more money. That's how a lot of people see it.
Because of the media that is portrayed.
So
However, what I will also say is because I was on the march last year, I saw the people that were there. First, there's a face of curiosity, then they smile,
Yeah.
and then they're taking pictures.
Yeah.
Because there's something else that we're not talking about that it actually does. Now, Respect from Gang actually said his favourite event of the year is the Reparations March, because all the people come together spiritually. You are all on the same plane, and everybody has an energy of virtue.
Yeah.
When you're there, and it's an African family.
It is, and that is the thing. The march is an African family occasion that we project to the world. And the African family is not just those of us who live in the UK.
Absolutely.
Many people come from the Caribbean, come from Africa, come from the so-called Americas, Abriella, to this march, other parts of Europe.
Yep.
They come in specially, or they're here and they attend. You see young people, you see old people.
It's truly
people,
intergenerational.
People,
Yeah.
people in wheelchairs,
Yeah.
people with their walking stick say, no, I'm marching, because they feel they haven't seen. Because carnival's not ours anymore.
No.
Okay?
Long time.
There's no other activity that happens in the UK to the size and the breadth and the diversity of the African Emancipation Day Reparations March. And we have a solidarity event. It's called Sankofa Pai, Pan-African Libation Ceremony, that takes place every 1st of August in Ghana, in Accra, most of the time. That happens in solidarity. We organise collectively, and every year there's been solidarity marches or events, however big or small they may be, in parts of the Caribbean, other parts of Africa. But in particular in Namibia and in Ghana, there are regular solidarity initiatives. So Ghanaians who at this time are protesting the invasion in terms of the US military base, AFRICOM, are connecting that aspect of their Mangami, our people's Mangami, but they are fighting. They're connecting with us here in the UK. So people come with their placards and banners that represent struggles and movements and campaigns from around the world, where our people are not only resisting, but they're also being the change. They've also, because we have to.
Yes.
We cannot expect people who have harmed us and who continue to harm us to have the solutions.
No.
The solution comes within. That is why we say reparation by our own people's power. Reparation is not something you sit back and wait to be done for you. So we have to change the language, because a lot of the time when people talk about reparations, they'll say, oh, do you think so-and-so should get reparations, or should so-and-so pay? It's always what someone else should do.
But you see, that is part of that European thinking.
Exactly.
And I always say to people, the first part of coming back to your African nature is extrapolating Europeans from your consciousness.
Exactly.
Because until you consciously do that, we see each other through European eyes. And when we do that, we see Europeans as our saviours.
Exactly.
But logic defies that your aggressor, someone who sold you, that commits daily racism with your children, your babies, our assets, our greatest assets to our future, would be our saviour. Yet still, we are looking for them. Even this morning, I'm having a debate about the school to prison pipeline, and a young lady said, more of us need to get embroiled in the system. And I said, but that system
it's a burning house.
Isn't broken.
Yeah.
It is about removing yourself from that and also rescuing all of those dissatisfied workers within it who are us to come into our own system.
That's it. That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Regaining sovereignty.
Absolutely.
Regaining our people's power, because everything that has happened to us, everything over the past, 6,000 years of the various invasions and so forth that some people talk about, as a result of our powerlessness.
But we have it.
Yeah?
And the key now, just as you speak about sovereignty, trusts lie outside of legislation.
Yeah.
A charitable trust
Yeah.
lies outside of UK legislation. And any director of that trust can become a sovereign.
That's right.
Now imagine if you had 50 or 60 sovereign peers who are directors within a community that extend across your educational trust, your political trust, your economic trust. All of this lies outside of UK legislation. But because we're not aware, because that is exactly what the 1% live under, and we feel so far removed from the 1%, we're oblivious to the fact that these solutions are in our hands.
That's right.
And then when we talk about self-determination, if you had 200 experts, education, politics, media, the justice system, and health, we would have in total our own trusts where we have sovereign directors who live outside of the system, not paying any taxation to that system, teaching the rest of us how to donate our taxation to support that system, which is all perfectly legislatively legal.
And this is some of the thinking that we need in terms of how we need to move forward with developing the solutions, how we're going to harness the resources, how we're going to collectively organise and put the right structures in place for our nation. And there are people and organisations within the movement who identify with the movement who are thinking along the same lines. And this is why it's great that there is a synergy, because you're doing, and many others who you work with are doing this great work, and there are also people who are thinking along the same, but we're not connected. But that's why the march is a way of bringing us all together, because it promotes this movement. It brings people out into the open that you didn't even know existed.
And without the march, I wouldn't be aware of the movement.
Oh, exactly. So we recognise that, but for many people that is how they see, so actually this is not just a few columnists writing in newspapers who give an idea about it. There are actually people organising around this.
7 days a week.
I want to come back to this point when you were talking about these trusts and so forth. When we talk about Stop the Maangamizi, which is what people see as, the problem, actually, this is the problem. The Maangamizi is the problem. But we say stop the Maangamizi, and in terms of the Stop the Maangamizi, we charge genocide, ecocide. We say to build Ma'atu Buntu Man. So you mentioned Black Panther and Wakanda, this fictional utopia, but Ma'atu Buntu Man is being developed by those who have been studying the nation-building examples that our people have developed. One such institution that is promoting this is the Global African People's Parliament. Now, Ma'atu Buntu Man is basically an African super-state, not the existing African Union, that is based on our ancient African ethical ideals of Ma'at and Ubuntu. Which really speaks to our interconnectedness, how we as a people not only connect with each other, but how then are we going to govern ourselves on planet Earth in a way that is just and upright? Are we going to switch places
with them?
Because it's kind of like, well, they've been doing it, so we can now start. It was now our turn. We want equality. Right. We don't want that Israel model. We use it as an example to teach about what not to do.
Absolutely.
So our repair is unlike any other people's repair process. Why? Because our bloodlines run throughout the four corners of the earth.
Absolutely.
So the notion of an African, who is an African, has to incorporate not only those at home, but those of us abroad. And it's not to now say we just want individual citizenship of these neo-colonial Bantu stands that have been carved up to suit Euro-American interests.
Absolutely.
What we're saying is the true repair, because even those borders are part of the damage. They're part of the Maangamizi. So what people need to know is that we've got brothers and sisters on the continent of Africa. So there are structures like GAFRIC, the Global African Family Reunion International Council, that is bringing together chiefs, traditional rulers and leaders and so forth, who are organising along the base of indigenous African polities. Because we had nation states and polities prior to our intervention with Arabs and Europeans.
Absolutely.
Those nation groupings still exist. So I work with Efes, for instance, who are separated by the borders of Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, Togo, okay? But they have their own ideas. So Pan-Africanism is not about uniting neo-colonial borders. It's a union of the peoples. So the Pan-African superstate that some people can identify through what they've seen depicted in a film like Black Panther and the marvel of a Wakanda, despite the many critiques and analysis that have come out about that film. But the positive aspects of it, what people gravitated towards, seeing this strong, powerful nation that was technologically advanced and so forth, that still had our traditional cultures that had been, because culture doesn't stay static.
No,
yeah?
evolves.
So we have to evolve. Okay, and so this notion of Ma'at Ubuntu Man is a state based on the principles of Ma'at and Ubuntu. Oman is a state in a Khan. Okay, so we're now going back to African political science, the science of governance. How did we govern ourselves? Our people didn't just disappear; they still are there, and maybe they're not recognised. Maybe they don't have the full legitimacy in terms of the existing nation states, but that's understandable because these states are there to serve other people's interests, not our own. And that is not fictional. We're working on Ma'at Ubuntu Man because what's happening is that there are these entities, like I mentioned, GAFRIC in Ghana, where they're developing what we call liberated zones. They're kind of like free communities. So in the diaspora, we spoke about maroonage, where we went off. And we tried to develop these communities where we could do for self.
Yes.
We could develop our self-reliance. We could build our institutions. Even in the diaspora, we have examples like the Black Panther Party, who had what? A survival program. Yes. Survival what? Pending revolution. Because we still have to provide the basic needs of our people, even whilst we want to evolve and revolve ourselves in terms of the ultimate establishment and the strategic goal of our reparations struggle, which is the establishment of this super state, which can provide for the collective security and material, spiritual, and ecological well-being of our people. Yeah? And that's our power base.
Absolutely.
And we need a government in the diaspora, because many of those who come into exile, who should be the true leaders of many of our African and Caribbean countries, are being persecuted because they have been standing up against the neo-colonial fifth columnists that we have in positions of government, many of them. They've been standing up against corrupt leadership. They've been standing up against those from amongst us who seek to align with our oppressors because they can send their children to schools and hospitals and colleges and universities in Europe or North America or Canada whilst their people are dying.
Absolutely.
If you talk about countries like Ghana, people are dying, because of a lack of basic health care. Yeah? They don't have no NHS, which, by the way, was established largely through looted funds that came from empire and colonies of Britain.
And then supported through employment.
Exactly. So all of this is about getting our people to become actors, reparations enforcers. They're no longer sitting, because I've seen terrible images on internet with someone sitting with a begging bowl, give me my reparations, sitting there with a handout. No, this is about our self-determination. Absolutely. This is about our liberation struggle. And some of this language we need to bring back, because I think there's a danger when we become so professional that we think, oh no, that was the 60s. Yeah. All we need now is professional. No. So what? Our freedom fighters and many of those who were running governments were not professionals?
What we have to remember as well is that there are many so-called educated people that think you can legislate your way out of a slave state. Yeah. And no power will capitulate by choice. When we talk about that holistic solution, it's going to be because we've learned to master and govern our own sovereign finances and banking systems that permeate throughout all of Africa. It will be because we have created a military that defends our borders. So when we're talking about a NATO, there is an African NATO. But I think where it seems so fantastical is that before this is governmental, this is going to have to be delivered through shadow government, so-called, when you're dealing with these colonial puppets. They will be first shadow government. But what we do know is we have the capability to do it because men and women of power who form the CIA, which is only shadow government and its own sovereign entity created by the wealthy to protect their interests, to carry out black bag wars and do things of this nature. But where we have a virtuous nature is in the defense of the continent and then in the defense of the people. There's a reason we're completely vulnerable to Europeans, because we don't belong to any nation, because black is nothing. Chinese people are Chinese in Jamaica, they are Chinese in Russia, they're Chinese in Ghana. They do not become yellow. I'm looking forward to meeting the first Martian when we go to Mars, and he'll look just like me and you. Because wherever we are, that's what we are. And at some point, through our universal codes of conduct, we're going to have to recognize that we are global Africans. And whatever the term is for that, that can amalgamate this Babel. Because just to give that quick story, the Tower of Babel, when man was almost to heaven on his boxes, and God supposedly knocked down those and said, so they can't do it, I give them all separate languages. And then the men started babbling. And that babbling is what we are doing. You will have people come for serious debate. No, we were Israel. No, we were this. Stop. And the key is for your effective counsel to see what is our common interest
out of all of that rabble. And that's where we're at. And I'm so
diplomats aren't being realised in all of this noise. But the diplomats are the saviours and the negotiators of what we will have.
And as you said, we have them. They're out there.
Yeah, of course they are.
And what people need to know, because we don't reveal everything, as I said.
We can't.
Because you spoke about shadow government. This is some of the talk that certain ones are having in the movement.
Most definitely.
This is a serious movement. Because remember, we've got all this learning now from all the movements that were crushed before. Some of the most, revolutionary even, that got crushed. We're learning from that.
Historical reference point.
The key point, and why we emphasise education being preparation for reparations, we have to see ourselves and become reparations action learners. Meaning, we learn to do it better through doing it.
Yes.
You get on the path.
There's no substitute for experience.
You get on the path, because you might start out. When I first started out in the movement, I had a particular understanding, because at that time the movement in the USA, for our people there, was the big thing, and it was very much about the compensation argument. And me as a young budding, law person, I thought I want to use my legal knowledge to serve this movement.
But you enrich their court system. That's all you're doing.
So I realise now, and after a couple of years of being involved, I realised it was a lot deeper than that. And I'll be very honest with people, because we all have to recognise our learning and growth. I struggled with the Chinwezu definition of reparations, because this notion that it was about us, I was thinking, but no, that's letting them off the hook. I didn't understand or overstand, as we say, what he really meant. And in fact, there's a quote that I just want to read very briefly that's very apt here. Our struggle for reparations is not asking anyone to give us anything or do anything charitable for us. Rather, it is a long overdue demand for what, by all the tenets of justice, is rightfully ours. We're demanding complete economic, political, social, cultural, spiritual and cognitive justice. That is justice in its holistic meaning. Receiving, this is the key point, the financial component of reparations will be meaningful only if it serves the holistic purpose and strengthens the integral whole of our self-repair process.
Yes.
Although no sum of money could ever erase our pain or wash away the blood our glorious ancestors shed at the hands of their enslavers and oppressors, we must have all that is necessary for restoring ourselves and future generations to the correct Pan-African heights of global justice. So the key thing is we must have the resources we need to develop the initiatives that some of which you have mentioned, and many others that will be represented on the day. So in terms of what's different, I would say what's different about this year's march in particular, although we started this approach last year, not many people kind of gravitated towards it. And what we've been doing in this last year is going out, finding out who's out there. You know, let's see where we can form, you know, a common unity, allegiances, linkages. Yeah, fair enough. You might not be interested in that aspect of it, but don't worry. That aspect of it, someone else is going to take care of that.
But you know the funny thing about us? We want to know so much about everybody else's role. Now, what you are is an architect, and I find this on a regular basis with people in projects. Oh, but what's that? So, well, you're a bricklayer.
Exactly.
Just lay your most perfect brick.
That's it.
Don't worry about the plumbing, the wiring,
leave that to
the
someone
windows,
else.
or the roof. It's not your concern. Because you're a bricklayer. Lay the most perfect brick. Understand that they are doing the best wiring, the best glove, and that is it. There's so much that we take away from our own responsibility. And to put it in very simplistic terms, because everything is outward, think about a partner that you'd want that says, oh, I'm waiting for somebody to come and buy me this shirt or iron and do this and that. I said, well, you want me to come and do what you won't do for yourself?
Exactly. That makes no sense. You're looking for a saviour when you need to save yourself. And we need to go beyond this Messiah complex because that's very much ingrained in us.
How you want me to leave Superman alone?
We're looking for messiahs outside of ourselves.
I saw Superman in 1982. I can't leave him.
And our people in particular are affected by the Messiah complex. But if people truly understand the Hebraic notion of a Messiah, the Messiah was not an individual. The Messiah could only come out of a people who were rising, upstanding. It's a collective, but the individual who might say is the leader.
That Messiah.
It's a people struggle. It's the collective. It's not just this one figurehead, which is what we've got into. So then it is about developing that leadership within you. You're born to lead something.
But you see, we have that as well. And where we look externally, even when we leave the Europeans alone and that God complex, we look for it in the Marcus Garvey. We look for it in the Malcolm X.
We create another fundamentalism.
And we can relax. Instead of contributing to that movement.
And saying, let us take it further than they did.
Yeah, because we're historians. And the one thing I say now, and I'm very much aware, Malcolm X nor Marcus Garvey would be any more celebrated in their incarnation today than they were back then. And although they were loved by those whom they were loved, they were despised by many, many more.
And that is also the case in the International Social Movement for African Reparations. So people need to know that you're going to have to choose. You're going to have to choose sides here.
Yes, absolutely.
And some of that choosing sides is also about choosing sides that might be seen as against our own people. But some of our people want to stay in bed with the slave master.
But
they've become comfortable
It's
there.
a Faustian deal. It's a Faustian deal based on short-term gains from white supremacy. But the problem with a Faustian deal is you don't get to turn off the music because your legs are tired when you've been dancing. You are now dependent on that provider. And that's what it is. And what people think, I'm going to take the money until I save them. I say, but what you don't realize is that you are actually becoming spiritually, intrinsically linked to this thing that you think you're going to have a short-term relationship with. When history should tell you that all those who get into bed with the beast are going to remain there.
Absolutely. And we're always going to be at the bottom of their pile. Because every group, they also have nationalism too. Yeah? Europeans have got that global nationalism.
Yes.
That's what the,
it's an economic union. It's not a cultural union.
So all of those who are living in Africa, when they were talking about land expropriation without compensation in Azania, so-called South Africa, some of them were seeking asylum in Australia, Canada, and even Russia. Geopolitics again. And we're not going to win this struggle if we don't have an understanding not only of the economics, the political economics or economy, but geopolitics. In terms of who are we as African people, who are our allies, who are the people
which revolve incidentally. Our allies revolve based on our interests at a particular time.
And as you said, what are our group interests? And we have to fight for those. So at the core of what ordinary people just come to identify with in a very basic way of reparations is the continuation of our liberation struggle at the core. And remember, I spoke about movement building. There are all these different tendencies within movement. So you get the conservative types, you get the liberal types, you get the revolutionary fundamentalist types, and the movement thrives on having all of those.
All of the above.
Because there's truth that can come from all of those experiences.
But the social truths must contribute
to the whole, the universal truth and the integrity of the whole. Absolutely. And that is what the march is really seeking to do. So the march is not just a march. It is a day of action. On the day we also honour our ancestors, because some people commemorate it as African Remembrance Day. So we begin with prayers and libations and the spiritual, if you like, blessings that we're calling forth to guide us on our journey. But we also have 3 minutes silence at 3 p.m. So we're saying, wherever you are, even if you're not marching, observe that. Let us be of one mind.
Because it's our ancestors.
One mind to acknowledge our ancestors on this day, as well as, projecting what we are doing to be part of the solution. It's also about sending a clear message to, in the, if you like, some people say this is the belly of the beast. I say, no, this is the mind of the beast.
Absolutely.
This is the mind, the brain.
You go home, you'll
for
see
this
the
global system. It came out of this place here.
And it
so-called
all started
UK. Yeah?
here.
And they used this. They were wickedly wise in terms of how they used whatever they used in order to subjugate. You think about that. 3/4 of the world's population.
Speaking English.
All right? So look at the different methods of warfare that they use. And it was total. In our spiritual, religious systems, the education system in particular. So what we have, many of our people who they say as being the most educated, and that's why I want us to be critically analytic about the term professional.
Academic.
Because a lot of the time, the people that are deemed to be the most educated or professional are the ones that have gone through their system and have been certified by their system. What this movement is also doing, it will also result in a renewal and a redefining of our knowledge systems. Yeah, what is truly ours? What is African? What are African values? How are they interconnected with what people would call universal values? Let us set those. We spoke about codes, the moral foundation of everything that we do. And we have to get this right. And we've got now so much knowledge to guide us. And there are parts, I spoke about the movement, but the street column, there's also the financial column. There's the legal column. There's the artistic or creative or edutainment column. There's columns that to deal with youth interests, women, other special interest groups, differently abled peoples in our community. So there are many different columns which are really constituencies, of people who share similar affinities and interests. That is how people get involved.
Absolutely.
Join with others in your so-called constituency, whether it's about an interest group, whether it's a community group, whether it's an issue that you care about. Join with others who are working in that regard. Let's begin to use a common language of repair, reparations, reparatory justice, to make ourselves whole, to heal and restore ourselves. That is the end goal. And at the end of this process, the people who we will be are not the people who we have been.
Absolutely.
So who we will be as African people will be far more powerful. Because we're not just now going along the lines of particular ethnicities. It will be based on that, but it will be so much more powerful and stronger in terms of now the global whole. And the fact that there are many others who can lay claim to that African identity. And ultimately, that is what it's about. Who is claiming Africa? Now, we have to be careful here.
Yes.
Because some of our same oppressors will tell you they're African.
Absolutely.
I remember when I went to Zimbabwe, you know, and I was speaking to white farmers, and they were speaking.
They're African.
Yeah, they're African.
Yeah.
So I saw, you know, I went onto one farm and there was the person and he sat there and he says, oh, you know, you can have some of my land. And I was like, question, well, how did you get this land?
Right. You took it.
I'm seeing this child, this 8-year-old daughter, get in a truck, driving it, free.
Yes.
He says, oh, we don't lock doors here.
Yeah.
And I said to them, yeah, but what about Europe? That's where you come. Why do I want to go back to Europe? My grandfather was buried here.
Yes.
My father was buried here. I will be buried here.
And we must remember that how they escaped from the dark ages of disease and the fire of London was by colonizing Africa and drawing the wealth.
Yeah.
So when it looks like Africa as a continent is at the 11th hour, because you say AFRICOM, which was exponentially grown through Obama because it couldn't be racism then. So, and China and the fact that they're going to bring in their military interests on board to protect their economic interests is at its 11th hour. We must never forget that Britain was overrun by disease, free-flowing sewage and filth, and then burned out and ultimately purged by the fire of London in 1666. And it went from being a desolate, barren island to a captain of industry that governed through his navy the entire planet. Opium to Chinese, human cargo, which was our kidnapped brothers and sisters, our ancestors, who became prisoners of war, and ultimately us, who've accepted the fact that we are prisoners of war and content with our status, in that we will defend that which is our oppression, seeking a deeper and more meaningful stake within a system which was created to traffic our bodies.
Absolutely. And that point is really key, because at this time, you know, with the whole Windrush scenario,
we are no different in our value to them.
And when you look at it, what is it that we're hearing? It is about people want the right to be British. Now, was our struggle, our historic freedom struggle, about the right to be American or British or Canadian or European? No, it wasn't.
Africans.
Still are, and it still is.
Yes.
And this is what, and it's beautiful that people like you are identifying with this movement. And I'm hearing, and I've heard many of people's experiences and critiques and feeling that they've been made to feel like they're, if you like, imposers. They are gate crashers. People shouldn't feel that way. This is your movement. You create your space. Nobody,
absolutely.
You know, I've had to create a space.
Again,
you know, everyone creates a space.
You see, if there is a fee, then possibly you're not a right fit for it, because what is created must go forward to wipe out something that has been for perpetuity.
Absolutely.
So if you don't have the strength, go away and develop yourself to become that lion that needs to impact on this movement.
And that's what's happening now. So it is ultimately the march, let me emphasize, is really about movement building. We're utilising it because many people in Africa who see the march, they're connecting with us.
Absolutely.
Oh, we've got this struggle. We didn't know you were going through this. We didn't know this, and we did in other parts of the diaspora that's happening too. We're connecting. So what people need to know is that When people come on the march, they form relations, they form bonds, they form connections,
Comrades.
they network, we link up, it's the real work happens from the 2nd of August and all year round. And where we're hoping that the march will go, because remember the power of this show of strength, totally community funded, not controlled by anyone apart from us, our people, very African in its appeal as a street protest of a difference, with all our creativity and all of our diverse expressions and our brilliance and our skills base that come in service on that day. So we preserve that for the example that we are showing to our brothers and sisters wherever they may be, because they look to us and they are inspired by us. And that is why even states are finding ways, how can we send delegations to this march? Because they know that we have the power of the people. We have the voice of the people. And what can happen sometimes, even within African and Caribbean states, is that because these are not our states, the more people hold on to these decrepit, states, is the more they become alienated from their people.
Definitely.
What we're doing with this march is we are staying in touch with the people. Yeah? And yes, there will be vanguards, and we have vanguards. And this is perhaps where you're talking about a certain class of people who've got certain knowledge and skills that are not everyday knowledge and skills that we need in our movement. Those are the vanguards. But at other levels, there are different ways in which we're connecting together so we can build that into the everyday organising and strategies. And the movement, as it grows stronger, develops its own infrastructure. So there's something called INASAR, the International Network of Scholars and Activists for African Reparations. That is about the academic column, the people who are producing, some are going away doing the research in different areas, not only of the problem, but what will it take to fix this? The ones who are spending diligent hours doing that meticulous research that we need, we have them, they're involved. But I'm saying to anyone who might not see themselves in that class or that group as yet, you have the potential to be that. Because we're saying to everyone, you have to become your own expert.
Absolutely.
Certainly on your life story, your family's life story, that's part of the evidence base, that we can show the continuing harm, through which by all tenets of natural justice and international law, people that are going through and continue to experience harm have a right to reparation.
Absolutely.
It is a human right, it is a people's right, it is a sovereign right. But we have to put ourselves in a position where we can enforce that right. And ultimately, what the protests like the march do, it is about building that power base. Malcolm X told us in the 60s, if you look at your power base, you have to look to Africa.
Yes.
You have to look at where you have a chance to govern more wholly than you can even in the diaspora. You don't have to physically live in Africa.
But you must have the support.
A connection and the support. Now, the model of, if you like, citizenship, global African citizenship, that some of us who are concerned with what is this new nation going to look like? What is this Ubuntu man? Yeah, and for those who are still on their fictional Wakanda, how do we actualize a Wakanda? How would we develop a system of, well, this is what makes you a citizen of our nation. This is going to be our constitution. This is how we're going to be governing ourselves. We have people working on ideas like that, coming from many different traditions.
And they have to.
Yes.
Because it must be universal law.
And we take the best then of what everyone is producing.
And apply that to each nation.
So everyone should be able to find your connection to this. And stake, and actually, stake a claim to being involved, because once you are an African, you have a right to be involved with this movement. We're encouraging people to do family history research. Find out who were the people, because there are many, we've got libraries in our communities who are dying off.
Definitely.
Yeah? Many of our elders who we didn't know were involved with certain struggles and did certain things and helped to secure some of the gains that we enjoy, but we just see them as a little humble old lady or man, and they were brought up in an area where you didn't talk certain things. Yeah? So we don't know the brilliance that we have amongst us. Let us find a way to document that for our community's posterity. And everyone do that family research. Look at the impact of the harm in your own family. Become advocates of your own personal family case, because even when people think they're going to sit and receive something, we challenge each other. Well, what gives you the right? Who made you the custodian of your whole lineage's wealth? Yeah? How then a family is going to govern themselves so that they're in a position that we have our own governance structures in our families, in our households. We have our own order again, as we have done in various aspects of the most successful of our movements. Come onto the march with banners, placards which speak to the change that you are involved in making, or the resistance that you are engaged in. It's important that you see yourselves as media. You are telling a story to every onlooker that will be watching and observing us. What is the message that you're going to give? On the websites that we have, www.reparationsmarch.org, we have downloadable banners that people can use if we want to have some uniformity of messages. We've come up with, on another website, we have www.stopthemaangamizi.com. Maangamizi is spelled Maangamizi. Then there's a whole list of, there's about 50 different slogans that you can adapt and so forth. The key thing is the messaging. What message? Because we have to tell the world, and we're also about convincing hearts and minds. Yeah? You get the heart, you get the mind, the body will follow. Absolutely. The action will follow. Our people will follow. 100%. And we rely on everyone that comes to help us do this. It's part of our story in the making. You are part of this story, our story. Yeah? But everyone comes with their unique contribution. And all contributions, as long as they are in the general service and upliftment of our people, then they are valid and they are welcome. And that then we will see that we have the governance. We have it, because we often talk about things as though they're impossible. We can't achieve it. We're not doing it. Our people are doing it.
Seeds germinate.
So that's all. That's the key thing. Another last point I think I want to make around this is that it is a day of community service. We still do need people to come forward to volunteer for stewarding. Yes. We want to steward our own march.
And not be policed.
We don't want them to police us.
Absolutely.
Yeah? We have to see it as national service.
Which
every day, every 1st of August, see this as your national service. Bring your family members. Yeah? And from the young to the old, this is a family day. It's a community day. And even if, you're just by yourself, come along. You will meet people. Talk to people who are on the march. Find out who is walking beside you. Form the connections and commit to continuing the work the day after. That is going to be the key thing that will determine our overall success at what we're trying to do.
And with that, I'd like to thank Esther for her time, for the insights that even I've received, the huge education about what the whole movement actually entails. And the request I'd like to make of the community is that it is our day of national service. And if you do have a contribution, contact the organisation, www.reparations.org. Reparationsmarch.org. Download your banners, but be thinking about how you can come in and improve upon what is happening and meet the people involved in the organisation to grow it out to every single sector that we need to repair. Family, thanks for watching us on The Solution Room with HMP TV.